It's time to rest now. It will all be over soon.
In the beginning there was darkness, not the kind that falls at night, but the kind that grows inside a heart that has forgotten how to feel. Listen closely. This is the story of Adaora, the nurse who killed to find peace, to escape the weight of her workload, and met terror instead. Before you go anywhere, hit the subscribe button, tap like, and stay with me till the end, because what happened next will shake you. They tried every trick to twist justice, but fate has a strange way of fighting back, even from the grave. Now watch how a healer became a killer, and how the dead found their justice. The hospital corridor stretched long and empty, lit only by the cold glow of machines that breathed for those who could not breathe alone. In that silence, a hand moved, steady, certain, without tremor. Adaora's hand. In it, a syringe filled with liquid that promised sleep but delivered something darker. She stood in front of the first bed. The old man lying there had called for water 3 times that evening. She had ignored him each time. Now she would give him something to drink that he would never wake from. "Sleep," she whispered, and the needle found its mark. 1. She moved to the next bed. A woman whose children had stayed by her side all day, filling the ward with their laughter and prayers. Adaora hated their joy. She hated their hope. "Sleep," she said again. 2. Down the row she went, bed after bed, soul after soul. 10 patients trusted her care. 10 injections delivered with the precision of a woman who had been trained to heal but had chosen to harm. 10 deaths she planted like seeds in poisoned ground. When it was done, she walked to the wall where the security camera blinked its red eye. She pulled the wire. The light went dark. She smiled. "No one will know," she told herself. "No one will ever know." But the ancestors were watching, and they always remember. 4 years earlier, before the blood, before the bodies, there was a classroom. Adaora sat in the back row of the nursing program at the university, her notebook pristine, her expression cold. Around her, other students laughed and shared stories of why they wanted to become nurses. They spoke of sick grandmothers they had watched suffer, of younger siblings they had cared for, of a call to serve. Adaora said nothing. The lecturer, Mam Ngozi, a woman whose hands had delivered 1,000 babies and closed the eyes of 1,000 dying souls, stood before them and spoke with the weight of experience. "Listen to me, my children. To be a nurse is to be a vessel. You pour yourself out so that others may be filled. You must have compassion. Without it, you are just a person in uniform, empty, useless, dangerous." Adaora raised her hand. "Mama, does compassion pay rent? Does compassion put food on the table?" The classroom went silent. Mama Ngozi studied the young woman before her. "My daughter, what is money without a soul? What is success without humanity?" "Humanity is overrated," Adaora replied, her voice sharp as broken glass. "I'm here to learn a skill, not to become a saint." Her classmate Chioma whispered to the girl beside her, "That one will not last. You cannot nurse without a heart." But Chioma was wrong. Adaora did last. She passed every exam. She mastered every procedure. She graduated with honors, her certificate held high, her smile forced for photographs, her heart as cold as it had always been. On graduation day, while others embraced their families and wept tears of joy, Adaora stood alone, looking at her certificate and thinking only one thing: "Now I will make them pay me what I'm worth." She did not know then that worth cannot be measured only in money, that a person's value is counted in kindness given, in suffering eased, in lives touched with gentle hands. She did not know. And by the time she learned, it would be too late. St. Matthew's Hospital rose like a fortress at the edge of the city, a place where the sick came seeking miracles and the dying came seeking peace. It was always full, always loud, always demanding. Adaora arrived for her first day with her uniform crisp, her shoes polished, her face set in an expression that warned others to keep their distance. The head nurse, Sister Patience, showed her around. This is the intensive care unit. Our patients here need constant attention, constant love. Can you give them that? I can give them what they pay for, Adaora replied. Sister Patience frowned, but said nothing. The hospital was short-staffed. They needed bodies in uniforms. They could not afford to be particular about personalities. On her second day, an elderly man in bed 7 pressed his call button. He needed to use the bathroom. Adaora ignored the buzzing for 15 minutes while she scrolled through her phone. When she finally came, he had soiled himself. "Clean yourself up," she told him. "I'm not your maid." The old man began to cry, not from the shame of his accident, but from the cruelty in her voice. A fellow nurse, Blessing, heard the commotion and rushed in. She cleaned the man tenderly, speaking soft words of comfort, telling him it was all right, that these things happen, that there was no shame. When they left the room, Blessing confronted Adaora in the hallway. "How can you speak to him like that? He's someone's grandfather. He's a patient, a number in bed. Don't be so emotional, Blessing. You'll burn out fast with that attitude. Better to burn out with love than to last forever with cruelty." Adaora laughed, a sound without warmth. "We'll see who's still here in 5 years." But Blessing was right. In the ancient wisdom of our people, there is a saying, "A tree that bears no fruit may live long, but no one mourns when it falls." Months passed, then a year, then 2. Adaora remained at St. Matthew's, but she did not grow in skill or spirit. Instead, something dark began to bloom inside her, a hatred that fed on every long shift, every demanding patient, every moment she felt unappreciated. She watched other nurses form friendships, gathering in the break room to share food and laughter. She was never invited. She told herself she didn't care. She saw how they stayed late without complaint, how they held the hands of dying patients, how they cried when they lost someone despite their best efforts. "Fools," she muttered, crying over strangers. One evening, after a particularly difficult shift, Sister Patience called Adaora into her office. "Adaora, we need to talk about your attitude." "My attitude? I do my job. What more do you want? Nursing is not just doing a job, it's serving, it's caring. The patients are afraid of you. The other nurses don't trust you." Adaora stood abruptly. "Then fire me. I'll find work elsewhere." Sister Patience sighed. She had seen nurses like this before, competent but cold, skilled but soulless. "I'm not firing you. I'm trying to help you. This path you're walking, it leads nowhere good." "Thank you for your concern," Adaora said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "May I go now?" She left the office with rage burning in her chest. Not shame, not reflection, just rage. That night, lying in her bed, she thought about the 10 patients in her ward, how they demanded attention, how they complained, how they never seemed satisfied no matter what she did. If they want to die so badly, she whispered to the darkness, maybe I should help them. It was a terrible thought, a thought that should have horrified her the moment it entered her mind. But it didn't. Instead, it settled there like a seed in fertile soil, waiting to sprout. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday night in the dry season when the air was thick and the moon was hidden, Adaora reported for the night shift. Sister Patience handed her the assignment sheet. You have 10 patients tonight. Beds 1 through 10. 2 need medication every 2 hours. 1 needs constant monitoring. Can you handle it? Adaora took the sheet without looking at it. Of course. But inside, the rage that had been building for months finally reached its breaking point. 10 patients. 10 demanding, ungrateful patients who ring their bells and need their pillows adjusted and complain about the food and the temperature and the noise. 10 reasons why she hated her life. She waited until the other nurses left for their break. She waited until the corridor was empty, and the only sound was the beeping of monitors and the whisper of ventilators. Then she went to the medicine room. Her hands knew exactly which bottles to open. Her mind, trained in the science of healing, now calculated the science of death. She mixed chemicals that should never be mixed. She filled 10 syringes with poison disguised as medicine. And then she walked into the ward. The first patient, Mr. Okafor, was sleeping. He had 3 children who visited him every day. His wife had been coming twice, daily, bringing him homemade pepper soup because the hospital food was bland. Adaora didn't think about them as she pushed the needle into his IV line. "Sleep now," she whispered. The second patient, Mama Ifeoma, had been a trader at the market for 40 years. Everyone knew her. Everyone loved her. She was supposed to go home in 2 days. "Sleep now." The third, the fourth, the fifth. A teacher, a carpenter, a young woman who had just given birth to twins. "Sleep, sleep, sleep." She moved like a shadow, efficient and cold. No hesitation, no mercy. By the time she reached the 10th bed, her hands were steady. Her heart was calm. She felt nothing. And that was the most terrible thing of all. When it was done, she walked to the security camera and pulled its wire from the wall. The red light died. She smiled, believing she had erased all evidence of her crime. She did not know that cameras, like ancestors, have long memories. Dawn came gently to the city, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. But inside St. Matthew's Hospital, there was no beauty, only horror. Dr. Adebayo arrived at 6 a.m. for morning rounds. He walked into the intensive care ward with his coffee in hand, ready to check on his patients. The ward was silent, not with sleep, but with death. Bed 1, no heartbeat. Bed 2, no pulse. By bed 10, his cup lay shattered on the floor. Contact the police. Sister Patience was the first to arrive. When she saw what Dr. Adebayo had found, she screamed, not a small scream of surprise, but a deep, animal sound of grief and shock. Within minutes, the hospital was chaos. Doctors and nurses rushed in. They checked vitals, searched for explanations, tried to understand what could have caused 10 people to die on the same night. Adaora arrived as if called by an alarm. She pushed through the crowd, her face carefully arranged in an expression of shock. "What happened? Oh God, what happened?" Sister Patience turned to her, tears streaming down her face. "You were here last night. You were the only nurse on duty. What did you see?" "Nothing. I did my rounds. Everyone was stable. I don't understand this. I don't understand." But even as she spoke, some of the nurses were looking at her strangely. Because while Sister Patience's tears were real, while Dr. Adebayo's hands were shaking, while everyone else showed genuine horror, Adaora's eyes remained dry. Dr. Adebayo made the call. "Contact the police. This isn't natural. 10 people don't die like this. Not on the same night. Not without cause." By noon, investigators had arrived. By evening, the hospital had been sealed as a crime scene. And by midnight, everyone was whispering one name: Adaora. The interrogation room was small and painted the color of old bones. Adaora sat across from Detective Emeka, a man who had spent 20 years learning to see through lies. "Tell me about your shift that night." "I already told the doctors. I did my rounds. I checked medications. Everyone was stable when I left them. 10 people died, Nurse Adaora, all under your care. And that makes me a killer? I'm a nurse. I save lives, Detective Emeka leaned forward. Do you? Or do you just wear the uniform? Something flickered in Adaora's eyes, just for a moment, but she recovered quickly. I don't have to listen to this. Unless you're charging me with something, I'm leaving. We're reviewing the security footage. It will show us everything that happened that night. Adaora's heart jumped, but her face remained calm. Good. Then you'll see I did nothing wrong. She left the station, but her mind was racing. The camera. She had pulled the wire. But had she been fast enough? Had she done it correctly? That night, she made a phone call to a man she had sworn never to speak to again. Chinedu, her ex-boyfriend, the hospital's IT officer. They met in a dark parking lot far from prying eyes. I need your help. I don't help you anymore, Adaora. You made that clear when you... Please. She stepped closer, her voice soft now, her hand on his chest. I'm in trouble. They're saying I killed those patients, but I didn't. I swear I didn't. And now they want to use security footage against me. But you know how those cameras are, always glitching, always malfunctioning. Chinedu looked at her. He had loved this woman once. She had broken his heart, used him, thrown him away. But seeing her now, vulnerable and afraid, something old and stupid stirred in his chest. What are you asking me to do? The footage from that night. Make it disappear, please. They'll send me to prison for something I didn't do. Adaora, if you didn't do it, the footage will prove your innocence. And if the footage is corrupted, if it shows nothing, then there's no case against me. Please, Chinedu, for what we once had. He shouldn't have agreed. Every part of him knew it was wrong. But loneliness makes people do foolish things. And Chinedu was lonely. I'll do it. But after this, we're done. Forever. Forever, she agreed, and kissed him on the cheek. 2 days later, when the police requested the security footage, they found it had been wiped clean. Every file from that night, deleted, corrupted, irretrievable. Detective Emeka stared at the blank screen and cursed. Without the footage, his case was falling apart. The first hearing took place on a Wednesday morning, 3 months after the deaths. The courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the back rows. Family members of the victims sat in the front, their faces hollow with grief. Adaora entered wearing a simple blue dress, her hair pulled back, her expression one of wounded innocence. The prosecutor, Barrister Okonkwo, was a woman whose reputation was built on never losing a murder case. She stood and addressed the judge. Your Honor, we are here because 10 innocent people died under suspicious circumstances. All died on the same night. All were under the care of the accused. We have witness testimony, medical evidence, and what, counselor? Interrupted Adaora's lawyer, a slick man named Mr. Boniface, who had been paid well to defend her. Suspicion is not evidence. Coincidence is not proof. Barrister Okonkwo smiled thinly. We have security camera footage that will show exactly what happened that night. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The family sat forward. Finally, they would see. Finally, they would know. The bailiff set up the video equipment. The lights dimmed. Everyone held their breath. The screen flickered to life and showed nothing. Just static. Just blank, corrupted files. Barrister Okonkwo's face went pale. This is impossible. The footage existed. I was told, Mr. Boniface stood, barely containing his grin. Your Honor, it appears the prosecution's key evidence doesn't exist. Without proof, this case is merely speculation and grief-driven accusations against a dedicated healthcare worker. Adaora sat very still, but inside she was dancing. She glanced at the families and allowed herself the smallest smile. The judge, Justice Adeyemi, frowned deeply. Counselor Okonkwo, do you have any other evidence? We have testimony from hospital staff about the accused's behavior, her attitude toward patients. Attitude is not murder, Counselor. Your Honor, 10 people died. And without evidence of how or why, I cannot hold someone indefinitely on suspicion alone. Justice Adeyemi banged his gavel. This case is postponed for 3 months. If the prosecution cannot produce substantive evidence by then, I will have no choice but to dismiss all charges. The courtroom erupted. Family members screamed. Journalists shouted questions. Adaora was led out through a back door, her lawyer's hand on her shoulder. Outside, she breathed in the free air and whispered to herself, "They can't touch me. No one can touch me." But she was wrong. In this world and the next, justice has many hands. And one of them was about to reach out and grab her. His name was Obinna. His sister had been Mama Ifeoma, the market trader in bed, too. The woman who should have gone home to her grandchildren, but instead went to her grave. For 3 months, Obinna could not sleep. He lay awake every night, seeing his sister's face, hearing her voice, remembering how excited she had been about leaving the hospital. Just 2 more days, Obinna, she had told him on their last phone call. Then I'll be home, and we'll cook that jollof rice you love. She never made it home. Obinna had not attended the first hearing. The pain was too fresh, too raw. But he followed the news. He read about the missing footage. He heard how Adaora had smiled when the case was postponed. And he remembered something. 3 weeks before his sister died, she had called him, upset. A nurse had been rude to her, had refused to help her to the bathroom, had spoken to her like she was a burden. "Take a video, sister," Obinna had told her. "If she does it again, record it. Document everything." His sister had laughed. "Obinna, you watch too many crime shows. But fine, I'll record if it makes you happy." She had. Not that night, but the week before. She had recorded a video on her phone, complaining about her treatment, showing the empty hallways at night, capturing the date and timestamp. And her phone had been returned to Obinna with her belongings. He had never checked it until now. When he opened the video folder, he found something that made his hands shake. The last video his sister had taken was dated 3 days before she died. But the phone set up on the bedside table to record her complaints had also captured something else. Through the room's open door, it had captured the hallway. And at 11:47 p.m. on that Tuesday night, it had captured a figure moving from bed to bed. Adaora. The angle wasn't perfect. The lighting was poor. But it was enough. Enough to see her face. Enough to see the syringes in her hand. Enough to see death being delivered with cold precision. Obinna sat on his bed and wept. Then he picked up his phone and called Detective Emeka. "I have something you need to see." The courtroom was even more crowded for the second hearing. Word had spread that new evidence existed. Journalists from every major newspaper were present. Television cameras lined the walls. Adaora entered confidently. She had spent 3 months relaxing, believing she had won. Mr. Boniface had assured her the case would be dismissed. "No evidence, no case," he had told her. "You're going to walk free." Barrister Okonkwo stood when the judge entered. "Your Honor, we have new evidence that conclusively proves what happened the night those 10 patients died." Mr. Boniface shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The time for evidence was—" "Sit down, Counselor," Justice Adeyemi said quietly. "I want to hear this." A man stood in the gallery. Obinna. His face was carved from grief and determination. "Your Honor, my name is Obinna Okafor. My sister, Ifeoma Okafor, died that night. Before she died, she recorded this." He handed a phone to the bailiff who connected it to the courtroom's video system. The screen lit up. At first it showed Mama Ifeoma sitting in her hospital bed, talking to the camera about the rude nurse, about wanting to go home. The families in the courtroom began to cry, seeing their loved one alive again. Then Mama Ifeoma set the phone down on the bedside table, the camera still recording, facing the door. Timestamp, 11:43 p.m. For several minutes, nothing, just an empty hallway and the sound of machines beeping. Then, at 11:47 p.m., a figure appeared, Adaora. She moved from bed to bed, just outside the frame. But twice she passed directly in front of the door, her face clearly visible, syringes in hand. The courtroom gasped. Adaora stood up, her chair scraping loudly. That's edited. That's fake. But the video continued. It showed her checking the hallway. It showed her pulling the security camera wire. It captured everything. When the video ended, the silence in the courtroom was absolute. Justice Adeyemi looked at Adaora with something beyond anger, with disgust, with sadness that a human being could be so cold. Nurse Adaora Nwosu, I am ordering your immediate arrest. Bailiff, take her into custody. No, this is wrong. I'm innocent. She tried to run, but the bailiffs were faster. They grabbed her arms and pulled her back. The families erupted in cries of anguish and relief. Finally, justice was coming. But the story was not over yet. In Nigeria, as in many places, justice can be bought if you have enough money and know the right people. Adaora, sitting in her cell, made phone calls. To the senator whose campaign she had supported with favors she wished she could forget. To the commissioner who had visited her apartment on nights when his wife thought he was working late. To the pastor of a megachurch who preached about morality on Sundays, but practiced none of it during the week. Help me, she begged each of them. I helped you. Now help me. And because they feared exposure more than they valued justice, they tried. The senator appeared on television. This case is a witch hunt. Where is the evidence of intent? Nurses are overworked, underpaid. Perhaps there was a medical error, not murder. The commissioner made calls, trying to get the case transferred to a friendlier judge. The pastor preached a sermon about forgiveness, about how we are all sinners, about how this poor nurse was being persecuted. But the people were not stupid. Social media exploded, because justice for the 10 became the #1 trending topic. People marched in the streets. Journalists dug deeper and uncovered the connections between Adaora and these powerful men. One newspaper, The Daily Truth, published a front-page article with pictures of the senator leaving Adaora's apartment building at 2 a.m. The commissioner's phone records, mysteriously leaked, showed dozens of calls to Adaora's lawyer. The pastor's own church members began to leave, disgusted by his hypocrisy. In the end, power could not save her. Because there is a truth that even the powerful forget. A lie can run for a year, but one day the truth will catch it. Meanwhile, in a different cell, Chinedu sat with his head in his hands. He had been arrested 3 days after the second hearing, charged with tampering with evidence and obstruction of justice. Detective Emeka sat across from him. Why did you do it, Chinedu? Why did you delete that footage? She said she was innocent. She said they were framing her. And you believed her? Chinedu laughed bitterly. I wanted to believe her. I loved her once. She knew that. She used it. Tell me exactly what happened that night. How she contacted you. What she said. Everything. And Chinedu did. He confessed it all. The late-night meeting, the manipulation, the deletion of the files. He held nothing back because he was tired of holding it in. His testimony was damning, not just for him, but for Adaora. Because it proved she had known there was evidence, that she had deliberately tried to destroy it, that her claims of innocence were lies. When Barrister Okonkwo presented Chinedu's confession in court, it was the final nail in Adaora's coffin. Mr. Boniface tried to argue that Chinedu was lying to save himself, but no one believed it. The story was too detailed, too specific, too true. The final hearing took place on a Tuesday morning, exactly 1 year after the murders. Justice Adeyemi had spent the previous week reviewing every piece of evidence, every testimony, every video frame. He had barely slept, haunted by the weight of what he had to decide. The courtroom was standing room only. The families of the victims sat in the front row, holding hands, praying silently. Adaora was led in wearing prison clothes. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, but her eyes still held defiance. Justice Adeyemi entered, and everyone stood. "Sit," he said wearily. He picked up his written judgment. 10 pages. He read slowly, carefully, wanting everyone to understand. The evidence presented in this case is overwhelming. The video footage clearly shows the accused administering injections to patients who subsequently died. The toxicology reports confirm that poison was found in all 10 victims. The testimony of witnesses, including the accused's own accomplice, establishes motive, means, and opportunity. But beyond the evidence, this case troubles me deeply, because it is not just about one woman who killed. It is about how a system failed. How did someone with no compassion become a nurse? How did her cruelty go unchecked for so long? How did we, as a society, allow this to happen? Nevertheless, the law is clear. The accused has been found guilty of 10 counts of first-degree murder. The sentence for each count is life imprisonment. These sentences will run consecutively, not concurrently. Adaora Hanwosu, you will spend the rest of your natural life in prison. You will never again walk freely among us. You will never again hold power over another human being's life. The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered, others wept. The families embraced each other, finding some small comfort in the verdict. Justice Adeyemi banged his gavel for silence. There is one more thing I want to say. To the families, I know this verdict doesn't bring your loved ones back. No punishment can. But I hope it brings you some peace. And to anyone watching this case, choose your profession with care. Choose it with love, because power without compassion is not just dangerous, it is evil. He looked directly at Adaora. Do you have anything to say before you are taken away? Adaora stood slowly. For the first time, tears filled her eyes. But they were not tears of remorse. They were tears of self-pity. I just wanted peace, she whispered. I was tired. I was stressed. I just wanted peace. Justice Adeyemi's expression hardened. You wanted peace, so you made 10 graves. You wanted rest, so you gave 10 homes eternal grief. That is not peace. That is evil. You will have a lifetime to learn the difference. He banged his gavel one final time. Take her away! As the bailiffs let her out, the family stood and watched her go. Some called out the names of their dead. That's for Ifeoma. That's for my father. That's for my wife. Adaora did not look back. And as the heavy doors of the courtroom closed behind her, cutting her off from the free world forever, only one thought echoed in her mind. What have I done? But even that question came too late. Kirikiri Maximum Security Prison stands like a tomb at the edge of Lagos, surrounded by high walls topped with barbed wire that glints in the sun like the teeth of a hungry beast. This is where Adaora was sent. On her first day, the warden, a hard woman named Mrs. Odumosu, looked at her with cold eyes. We know who you are, what you did. The other inmates know too. I suggest you keep to yourself. But keeping to herself was impossible. In prison, there are hierarchies, unwritten rules, codes of conduct. And at the bottom of that hierarchy, below even thieves and fraudsters, are those who have harmed the helpless. Adaora's cellmates were three women: Amina, who had killed her abusive husband; Zainab, who had been caught smuggling drugs; and Ngozi, who had set fire to a shop that refused to hire her son. When they learned what Adaora had done, killed patients who trusted her, people who couldn't defend themselves, their eyes went cold. "You're sharing our cell," Amina said, "but you're not one of us. Don't talk to us. Don't look at us. Stay on your side." Adaora wanted to argue, to explain, but the look in their eyes stopped her. That first night, she lay on the thin mattress in the corner and tried to sleep. But sleep would not come. Instead, she saw faces. 10 faces rising before her in the darkness. Mr. Okafor, who had 3 children. Mama Ifeoma, who had wanted to cook jollof rice for her brother. The young mother with newborn twins. The teacher. The carpenter. The old woman. The young man. All of them staring at her with dead eyes. "Why?" they whispered. "Why did you do this?" she screamed and sat up, gasping. Her cellmates stirred, but said nothing. "Let her suffer," their silence said. "Let her feel what they felt." Night after night, it continued. Every time Adaora closed her eyes, the dead were waiting. Sometimes they stood silently at the foot of her bed. Sometimes they reached for her with cold hands. Sometimes they whispered her name over and over. "Adaora, Adaora, Adaora." She stopped sleeping. She would sit up all night, eyes wide, afraid to close them even for a moment. The prison doctor was called. He examined her, found nothing physically wrong. "She's having nightmares," he told Mrs. Odomosu. "Guilt, probably. Her mind is punishing her." "Good," Mrs. Odomosu replied. "Let it." But it was more than nightmares. During the day, walking in the prison yard, Adaora would hear voices calling her name. She would turn, but no one was there. She would see shadows moving at the corner of her vision, but when she looked directly, they would vanish. The other inmates began to avoid her, not just because of what she had done, but because there was something wrong with her, something broken. "That one is cursed," Zainab whispered to Amina. "You can see it in her eyes. The ancestors are punishing her." And perhaps they were. 3 weeks after arriving at Kirikiri, Adaora reached her breaking point. She had not slept in days. She had barely eaten. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, her hands constantly trembling. That night, as darkness fell over the prison, the haunting intensified. She saw all 10 patients standing in the cell, surrounding her mattress, staring down at her. "We just wanted to live," they said in unison. "We just wanted to go home." "Leave me alone," she screamed. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." But they didn't leave. They reached for her, their hands cold as death, and she felt them touching her arms, her face, her throat. She screamed and screamed until her voice was raw. Her cellmates woke and saw her thrashing on the mattress, fighting invisible attackers, clawing at her own throat as if trying to pull away hands that weren't there. "She's possessed," Ngozi whispered, backing away. "No," Amina said quietly. "She's paying her debt." The guards came. They tried to restrain Adaora, but she fought with the strength of madness. "They're here! Can't you see them? They're all here!" The prison doctor was called again. This time he sedated her, injecting her with drugs that should have put her to sleep within minutes. But even sedated, she continued to whimper and cry, her eyes rolling back in her head, her lips moving in silent pleas. They carried her to the infirmary. She lasted 3 weeks. Night after night, the dead gathered at her bed. By dawn, she was all tremor and whisper. When they found her, her eyes would not close. Coins did what mercy could not. By noon, word had reached the streets of Lagos. Mrs. Odomosu stood in the infirmary, looking down at Adaora's body. The young woman's eyes were still open, wide and staring at something no one else could see. Her hands were clenched into fists so tight that her nails had drawn blood from her palms. "What happened?" Mrs. Odomosu asked the night nurse. "She just stopped breathing, Ma." The doctor tried to revive her, but it was like her heart simply gave up. There was no medical reason. All her vitals had been stable after the sedation. Mrs. Odomosu looked at the corpse for a long moment. She had been a prison warden for 23 years. She had seen many deaths in this place. But this one was different. This one carried the weight of something beyond the physical. "Close her eyes," she said quietly, "and call her family." The nurse tried to close Adaora's eyes. Once, twice, 3 times. But they would not stay closed. It was as if, even in death, Adaora was still seeing the faces of those she had killed. Finally, the nurse placed coins on the eyelids, the old way, the way the ancestors taught. Only then did they stay shut. By noon, word had reached the streets of Lagos. The wicked nurse is dead. Adaora has died in prison. She lasted only 3 weeks. The news spread through markets and churches, through social media and WhatsApp groups, through every corner of the city. At St. Matthew's Hospital, the remaining nurses gathered in the break room when they heard. Sister Patience said a prayer. May God have mercy on her soul. But Blessing, who had once confronted Adaora about her cruelty, shook her head. Some souls put themselves beyond mercy. She had chance after chance to change. She chose cruelty every time. Dr. Adebayo, who had discovered the 10 bodies that terrible morning, simply stared out the window. I hope she found peace, but I doubt it. How can there be peace when you've buried your own humanity? The families of the 10 victims gathered when they heard the news, not to celebrate, but to process what this death meant. Obinna, Mama Ifeoma's brother, stood before them and spoke. My sister is still dead. Her children still cry for her at night. Adaora's death doesn't bring Ifeoma back. But perhaps there is something in knowing that justice was complete, that she faced her punishment, that she couldn't escape, not even in prison. An old man, the son of Mr. Okafor, added his voice. The Bible says vengeance belongs to the Lord, but it also says we reap what we sow. She sowed death, and death found her. There is a balance in that, a terrible balance, but a balance nonetheless. A young woman whose mother had been one of the 10 wiped her eyes. I prayed for her to suffer. I prayed for her to know what she did to us. And now I hear she died screaming, haunted, unable to sleep. Part of me feels satisfied, but part of me just feels empty, because my mother is still gone, and no amount of suffering can change that. They stood together in silence, these people bound by shared tragedy, trying to make sense of a senseless crime and an equally senseless ending. Finally, Obinna spoke again. Let us not celebrate her death, but let us remember our loved ones. Let us honor them by living with the compassion she lacked. Let us be the light she refused to become. And they all said, Amen. That evening in Cell Block D, Amina, Zainab, and Ngozi sat on their bunks, speaking in low voices about the woman who had shared their space for 3 terrible weeks. I've seen many things in prison, Amina said, but I've never seen anyone haunted like that. It was like the ancestors themselves were tormenting her. Zainab nodded. My grandmother used to say that when you kill without cause, without mercy, the spirits of the dead will never let you rest. Not in this life or the next. Ngozi, the quietest of the 3, spoke softly. She kept saying she just wanted peace. But peace is not something you can take by force. Peace is not something you find by silencing others. Peace is something you earn through how you live. She learned that too late, Amina said. No, Ngozi corrected. She never learned it at all. Even at the end, she was still asking, why me? She never understood that it wasn't about her. It was never about her. They fell silent, each lost in their own thoughts, grateful in a strange way that their crimes, however serious, had not been as unforgivable as Adaora's. Because in that hierarchy of wrongdoing, there are some lines that, once crossed, cannot be uncrossed. And Adaora had not just crossed that line. She had obliterated it. 3 days later, Adaora's body was released to her family. Her mother, a small woman bent with age and grief, came to collect it. She had not spoken to her daughter in 2 years, ever since the arrest. The shame had been too much. But she was still a mother. And so she came. The morgue attendant handed her the death certificate. Cause of death: cardiac arrest. But everyone knew the real cause. The heart can only carry so much guilt before it breaks. Mrs. Nwosu arranged a small, quiet burial in a cemetery far from the city. No announcement in the newspapers, no funeral service, no gathering of friends and family. Just a priest who agreed to say a few words, a gravedigger who dug the hole, and a mother who stood alone, weeping for the daughter she had raised but never truly known. I don't understand, she whispered to the priest. Where did I go wrong? How did my child become this? The priest, Father Okoro, an old man who had buried more people than he cared to count, spoke gently. Evil is not always inherited, my sister. Sometimes it is chosen. Your daughter had many opportunities to choose differently. She chose not to. But she was my baby once. She was innocent once. We are all innocent once, Mama. But innocence is not enough. We must also choose to be good. Every day, in every action, we must choose goodness. Your daughter chose something else. Mrs. Nwosu had no words left. She simply nodded and watched as they lowered the coffin into the ground. No one else came. Not classmates, not colleagues, not the politicians who had tried to save her. Just a mother, a priest, and a gravedigger. And as the first shovel of earth hit the coffin, Mrs. Nwosu whispered, May you find in death the peace you could never find in life. And may God have mercy on your soul, because the world will not. She turned and walked away, leaving her daughter in the ground. The gravedigger finished his work in silence, smoothing the earth over the grave. No headstone would be placed there. No flowers would ever be laid. Just bare earth and eventually, weeds. A grave for a life that had been wasted. A burial for a soul that had been lost long before the body died. 6 months later, at the University of Nursing, Mama Ngozi stood before a new class of students. They were young, eager, full of hope and dreams about the profession they were entering. She looked at them with eyes that had seen both the best and worst of what nurses could be. Before we begin, she said, I want to tell you a story. Some of you may have heard it already. Some of you may even know people who were affected by it. But I'm going to tell it again because it is a story that must never be forgotten. She told them about Adaora, not with cruelty, but with honesty. About the brilliant student who had no compassion. About the nurse who saw patients as burdens instead of human beings. About the woman who killed 10 people because she was stressed. The students listened in horrified silence. When Mama Ngozi finished, she let the silence sit for a moment before continuing. I'm not telling you this story to frighten you. I'm telling you this story to warn you. Because nursing is hard. The hours are long. The pay is often inadequate. The patients can be demanding, ungrateful, difficult. You will be tired. You will be stressed. You will want to quit. But in those moments, you must remember why you chose this profession. Not for money, not for prestige, but to serve, to heal, to bring comfort in times of pain. And if you ever find yourself looking at a patient with hatred instead of compassion, if you ever find yourself seeing them as a burden instead of a person, then it is time to leave. Walk away. Find another profession. Because a nurse without compassion is not just useless. They are dangerous. Adaora learned this too late. She paid for it with her life and the lives of 10 innocent people. Don't let her story be yours. A student in the front row, a young woman with kind eyes, raised her hand. Mama, what happened to her in the end? Mama Ngozi's expression softened with sadness. She died in prison, haunted by what she had done. The nurses who examined her body said she looked like she had been fighting something invisible. Her hands were clenched. Her eyes wouldn't close. Even in death, there was no peace for her. Another student asked, "Do you believe in that, Mama? That the dead can haunt the living?" Mama Ngozi considered the question carefully. "I believe that guilt is its own ghost. I believe that when we do terrible things, our conscience becomes our prison. Whether the spirits of those 10 patients truly haunted her, or whether it was her own mind punishing her, the result was the same. She could not escape what she had done." She looked around the classroom, meeting each student's eyes. "So I ask you now, before you go any further in this program, examine your hearts. If you cannot find compassion there, leave now. There is no shame in admitting this profession is not for you. But there is terrible shame, terrible sin in staying and causing harm." No one left. But every student in that room understood the weight of what they were being taught. This was not just a job, it was a calling. And with that calling came responsibility that extended beyond skills and knowledge into the very core of who they were as human beings. At St. Matthew's Hospital, changes were implemented. The administration, shaken by what had happened under their watch, instituted new policies. Mandatory psychological evaluations for all nursing staff, regular check-ins with supervisors about mental health and stress, a buddy system, so no nurse worked alone, increased security measures and camera systems that backed up to multiple servers. But more than that, they began to value compassion as much as competence. Sister Patience, now the director of nursing, made it her mission to create a culture where kindness was not just encouraged, but required. "We will not sacrifice humanity for efficiency," she declared at a staff meeting. Yes, we are busy. Yes, we are understaffed. But we will not allow another nurse to become so cold, so disconnected, that they see patients as problems instead of people. She implemented monthly gatherings where nurses could share their struggles, their frustrations, their grief, where they could support each other and be reminded why they had chosen this work. And slowly, the culture began to shift. Nurses who had been burned out found renewed purpose. New hires were selected not just for their skills, but for their character. Patients began to notice the difference. One elderly man, recovering from surgery, told Sister Patience, "I can feel it. The nurses here actually care. They see me, not just my illness, but me." Sister Patience smiled, but her eyes were sad. "We learned that lesson the hard way, sir. But we learned it well." Mama Ifeoma's grandchildren, now 3 years older, sometimes ask their father about their grandmother. Where did Grandma go? Their father, Obina's nephew, struggled to answer. How do you explain to children that their grandmother was murdered by someone she trusted? Finally, he settled on a version of the truth that they could understand. Grandma went to be with the ancestors. But before she went, she taught us something very important. She taught us that we should always be kind to people who are sick, always be patient with people who are suffering. Because when someone is sick, they need love even more than they need medicine. Did someone not love Grandma? His youngest daughter asked. His throat tightened. No, baby. Someone forgot how to love. And that forgetting cost us everything. I would never forget to love, she said, with the absolute certainty of childhood. I know, baby. I know. And that's how we honor Grandma. By being kind, by being compassionate, by being everything that person wasn't. The children nodded solemnly, not fully understanding but absorbing the lesson nonetheless. And perhaps that was Mama Ifeoma's final gift, that her death, as senseless and cruel as it was, could teach her grandchildren about the importance of mercy. That even in tragedy, there could be lessons that outlive the pain. Now the story has been told. From beginning to end, from the first injection to the last breath, you have heard how Adaora became a monster and how that monster was destroyed. But what is the lesson? What is the wisdom we take from this terrible tale? Listen, and I will tell you. First, compassion is not optional in any profession that serves others. It is the foundation. Without it, all your skill, all your knowledge, all your efficiency means nothing. Worse than nothing, it becomes a weapon. Second, stress is not an excuse for cruelty. We all face pressure. We all get tired. We all have moments when we want to give up. But those moments are tests of our character. How we respond reveals who we truly are. Third, evil is often built one small choice at a time. Adaora did not wake up one day and decide to kill 10 people. She started with rudeness, then neglect, then contempt. Each small cruelty made the next one easier until, finally, murder seemed reasonable. Guard your heart against the first small cruelty because it opens the door to greater ones. Fourth, you cannot outrun your conscience. Whether you believe in ancestors, in God, in karma, or simply in the working of the human mind, the truth remains. Terrible deeds create terrible consequences. Adaora tried to escape justice, and when that failed, she tried to escape her guilt. But both followed her into prison and ultimately into death. Fifth, justice may be delayed, but it comes. The powerful tried to protect Adaora. The corrupt tried to set her free. But truth is a seed that, once planted, will grow through concrete. The brother who saved a video, the ex-boyfriend who confessed, the judge who refused to be swayed, each played their part in ensuring that evil did not triumph. Sixth, there is no peace for those who bury mercy. Adaora wanted peace. She craved it. She thought she could find it by eliminating the sources of her stress. But peace is not the absence of difficulty. Peace is a state of inner harmony that comes from living rightly. She destroyed that possibility with her own hands. And finally, the deepest lesson of all, we are all connected. Those 10 patients were not just numbers in beds. They were fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters. They were people with families who loved them, with lives that mattered. When Adaora killed them, she didn't just end 10 lives. She wounded 10 families. She traumatized an entire hospital. She cast a shadow over an entire profession. Her evil rippled outward like a stone thrown into still water, touching shores she never imagined. And that is true of all of us. Our actions, good or evil, never affect only ourselves. We live in a web of connection, and every thread we pull affects the whole tapestry. So choose wisely, choose kindness, choose compassion, because in the end, we all face the same choice Adaora faced every day. Will we be a source of healing or a source of harm? She chose harm, and she found no peace, not in life, not in death, not in the cold ground where her body lies in an unmarked grave. Years have passed since that terrible night. The 10 patients have been dead for years now, buried in graves marked with love and flowers, remembered by families who speak their names with both pain and pride. Adaora has been dead almost as long, buried in a grave no one visits, forgotten by all except those who study crime and those who teach ethics. St. Matthew's Hospital still stands, still serving the sick, but with new policies and a new culture that values compassion as much as competence. The nursing school still teaches its students, but now they teach Adaora's story as a warning, as a lesson in what happens when skill is divorced from humanity. The families have healed somewhat, though the wounds never fully close. They have learned to live with their loss, to find meaning in their pain, to honor their dead by living with the kindness that was denied them. And in the city, on quiet nights when the wind blows through the hospital corridors, some nurses swear they can still hear echoes, not of Adaora's screams, but of something older, wiser, more patient, the voice of justice, the voice of consequence, the voice that whispers to every nurse, every doctor, every person who holds another's life in their hands. Remember, always remember. You hold not just a body, but a soul. Not just a patient, but a person. Not just a case, but a life that matters. Treat them well. Treat them with mercy. Because one day, you too will lie in a bed, vulnerable and afraid, needing someone to be kind. Be now what you hope to find then. This is the story of Adaora, the nurse who forgot her humanity and paid the ultimate price. But more than that, it is a story for all of us, a reminder that we choose every day what kind of people we will be. And those choices have consequences that echo far beyond our imagining. So choose life, choose mercy, choose compassion, because peace never lives where mercy was buried. And that is the truth that outlasts all stories. The tale is told, the fire burns low, and the ancestors have witnessed. Adaora sought peace and found only shadows. Let her story remind us that no matter how long darkness hides, truth will always find light. If this story moved you, hit subscribe and share it. Not for me, but so others never forget what happens when mercy is buried. Because peace never lives where compassion has died. And in the end, that is the truth that outlasts all stories.